In 333 BC, the greatest army the world had ever seen was shattered. When Darius III, the King of Kings, fled the field of Issus, he left behind unimaginable treasure. But the true prize, the leverage that would destroy his morale and fuel Alexander's greatest propaganda victory, was the terrified, captive heart of the Persian royal family. What happened in the days following their capture changed history. The battlefield was a slaughterhouse. As the dust settled over the blood-soaked plains of Issus, the surviving Macedonian troops realized they hadn't just won a battle, they had seized an entire empire. The roar of war transitioned into the silence of looting, and the men soon discovered the enormous royal baggage train Darius had foolishly brought with him, a moving city of gold, jewels, and luxury, designed for parade, not war. They had found the king's private retreat, and it was still occupied. Deep inside the sprawling, opulent tent complex, the royal women heard the sickening approach of the conquering army. Darius III had fled so swiftly that he hadn't even warned them. Trapped were his formidable mother, Sisygambis, his beloved wife, Stateira, renowned as one of the most beautiful women in Asia, and his two young daughters. Imagine the sudden, horrifying realization: their king was gone, and they were utterly alone, awaiting the mercy of a savage Greek barbarian. Macedonian officers burst into the silk-draped quarters, their armor dented, their faces grimed with the dust of battle. Their presence alone was terrifying. For these royal women, the loss of their dignity felt guaranteed. Persian custom dictated that captured royal women were often subjected to the brutal whims of the conquerors, either sold into slavery, or worse, used to reward the triumphant generals. Every sound outside promised a new form of violation. Reports quickly reached Alexander. He was initially furious that Darius had escaped, but the news of the captive women instantly shifted his focus. Alexander knew that treating the family well was not just an act of mercy, but a weapon far sharper than any sword. He immediately sent Leonidas, one of his most trusted generals, with strict orders: not a single man was to approach the women's quarters, and their honor must be protected at all costs. Even with guards posted, the fear was paralyzing. The women began to mourn Darius, assuming he had been killed in the frantic retreat. Stateira, in particular, was inconsolable, weeping loudly for her husband, convinced their lives were forfeit. Sisygambis, the matriarch, attempted to maintain a regal composure, but the terror was palpable, echoing off the finely woven tapestries of their prison. They awaited Alexander's imminent arrival, the moment of reckoning. Finally, the royal tent flaps parted. Two figures entered. The women knelt immediately, preparing for the worst. Sisygambis, attempting to guess which man was Alexander, focused on the taller, more imposing figure who radiated authority. This was Hephaestion, Alexander's closest friend and companion. Mistaking his towering height and noble bearing for that of the king, she threw herself at his feet in supplication. The real Alexander stood quietly beside Hephaestion, slightly shorter, but with the searing eyes of a true commander. When Sisygambis realized her mistake and scrambled back in horror, Alexander displayed one of history's greatest examples of calculated chivalry. He gently raised her from the ground, saying, "You were not mistaken, mother. This man is Alexander too." He assured her that they would be treated as royalty. This was an extraordinary moment. Alexander was not interested in violating these women, he was interested in adopting them. He treated Sisygambis with the respect usually reserved for his own mother, Olympias. He granted Stateira and the others complete freedom within their gilded cage, ensuring they lacked nothing of their former royal life. He even promised that Stateira would continue to be recognized as Darius's wife. This was the ultimate psychological warfare. Darius, receiving news of the meticulous, honorable treatment of his mother, wife, and daughters, was humiliated and enraged. A barbarian king was showing more respect to his family than he had shown them himself by abandoning them. Every new report amplified Alexander's image as a merciful, legitimate successor, while underscoring Darius's failure as a husband and a king. Yet, captivity is still captivity. For years, the Persian royal women traveled with Alexander's army, always under guard, always magnificent, but always prisoners. They watched as Alexander destroyed Darius's empire piece by piece. The initial terror subsided, replaced by a cold, chronic dependency on their conqueror. They were part of Alexander's magnificent display, symbols of his success and his perceived divine right to rule Asia. The tragic element continued. During their captivity, Stateira died, likely from childbirth or illness. Alexander mourned her deeply, giving her a lavish, royal funeral befitting the Queen of Kings. This gesture further cemented Sisygambis' complicated feelings. Her own son had fled and failed, Alexander had conquered, yet now provided comfort and respect in the face of death. The final twist came years later, after the final defeat of Darius. Alexander arranged the magnificent Susa weddings to cement the fusion of Greek and Persian cultures. He himself married Darius's eldest daughter, also named Stateira. His friend Hephaestion married the youngest daughter, Tripedis. The daughters were no longer prisoners, they were political trophies, tied by marriage to the fate of the Macedonian king. Sisygambis' transformation was complete. She had become genuinely devoted to Alexander, the man who had shown her more honor than her own son had. When news reached her in 323 BC that Alexander the Great had died unexpectedly in Babylon, the aging matriarch was utterly heartbroken. She refused all food and drink, rejecting her Persian heritage and ultimately mourning the loss of the man who had shattered her world, but then rebuilt it with strategic kindness. Alexander's treatment of Darius's family remains a masterful study in political theater. He conquered them not with rape or plunder, but with calculated mercy, transforming terrified enemies into loyal dependents. By respecting the royal women, he legitimized his own claim to the throne and psychologically disarmed his greatest adversary. It was a victory won not on the battlefield, but within the silken tents of his defeated rival's family.